Western states auto insurance. We're focused on 5 states on the West Coast of the US. Right now, this customer is using Cognos analytics to do things like, having a claims dashboard, understanding where the claims are and looking at data points and pivot points around that. We're able to do policy analysis and customer complaints. There's other business metrics that we're looking at. So I'm going to take you through some of the kind of current state, but then what we really want is the ability to understand the actual process, right, and visualize that in a standard representation. We want to understand why it's getting stuck in certain places, right? I can see that there's claims that are running over our expected SLA, but why? Why is that happening? And then looking at where we can improve, right? And understanding based on this data, based on the information that we already have, how can I make improvements? How can I move this forward? And so what we're going to do is just start with the as is with the Cognos analytics state. And you can see this is our policy dashboard. So this is looking at various customer complaints. We can look at it in a variety of different charts and graphs. It's very intuitive. It's very easy to interact. We can even click in and get specifics on things like California. I want to focus in on Oregon. I want to focus in on Washington. You can see the charts and graphs move as I interact with that map. I can go into specific details around things like policyholders, understanding, just different ways to represent the data and graphically show in a very understandable way what's happening with my business right now. This is my heat map. This is my temperature of what's going on with the business. I can dig into things like policy details and understand how did the policies break down. So really pivoting on certain aspects of the data, in this case, the vehicle type, being able to go in and say, show me this breakdown by different roles that are being played, or by different vehicle types, or by, and looking at different analysis that way. We can also look at trends. So it's not to say that we don't see historical data here, but we can't chain it back. I can't represent this as a process. I can see trends over time, but that's just data. That's kind of a snapshot in time of what the data looks like. It's not showing me for a particular claim or for a particular policy what led up to this, right? What were all the events that happened that may even be seemingly unrelated that are contributing to this being red or this being out of compliance, right? We can also look at this from a claim standpoint. So this is where we're going to get into some of the data that we'll utilize for our IBM Process Mining example. So this is just looking at different claim information. I can pivot on this through those 5 different states that I see here. So if I wanted to look at California claims, I can look at that. It breaks it down again by data type. It's a snapshot in time of these particular data points that I can use and visualize in many, many different ways, in very understandable ways. So it's very business friendly. It's very easy to understand. But again, there's something missing. It's that root cause that we can't do here, which we're going to show how we can do with process mining. So imagine, if you will, that I've taken this data so you can understand that there's probably a whole set of information behind this that's driving these dashboards. If I had a way to extract that data into a standard format, like an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV or even JSON, XML, whatever it is, I could then bring that into process mining very easily. So the example here is that I have data points, right? In this case, this represents almost 80,000 different transactions, different records that are occurring, all within different points in the claim, right? For process mining to work, we need a minimum of 3 pieces of information. I need some kind of a unique ID, right? In this case, the claim number. I need some kind of timestamp or indicator of when this occurred. In this case, I have a timestamp. And then I need some kind of an activity name or description. And in this case, I have the step of the claim that's being done. Now, any other information that we add is going to be bonus, because again, this is about not just visualizing the process, but understanding why the process behaves the way it does, to be able to do root cause. And the more information I can include in that root cause, the better our information or our understanding of the process is going to be. So things like user, who worked on the claim, right? If I see things are getting stuck and it's only one of these 3 users, then maybe I have a training issue. Maybe it's just something that I have to make sure that they're understanding how to, progress that claim or work on that claim. Or if I look at the location, right, or the geography, right, where is this happening? Maybe there's something that is going wrong in Washington, and I can fix that, but I need to know that that's actually the case, that that's actually where those things are happening. I can look at the location the vehicle is in at any given point, right? Whether it's the repair shop or the liquidator or the assessor. And then finally, we have the amount. So this is a very small subset of the data that I could use. We're using this for a demo purpose so that we can see kind of a very simple set of data. But ideally, we have dozens and dozens of fields that we can start looking at and pivoting and understanding patterns and correlations that are occurring so that we can truly get to the why. Why does this process behave the way it does? So with that, we're going to create a brand new process mining project. So I'm going to use that data to essentially generate and then analyze what's going on with that process. So I'm just going to upload. In this case, we're doing it manually, but you can do this through a API. You could do this in real time. You can tie it into an integration layer. So there's a lot of different ways that we can input this information. And this setup that I'm doing here is a one-time mapping exercise. So once I map the data to those specific fields, so in this case, we have the process ID, we have the timestamp, we have the resource, we have custom fields. I can add as many custom fields as I want. And once I do that mapping, I don't need to do that again. I can continue to upload data as I go and not need to worry about remapping the fields, right? So that's kind of a one-time setup. We're going to go ahead and generate the process. And what I'm presented with is typically going to look like that third type of process that Michael presented, right? Where we have, this is the way it was designed, this is the way it actually works, or this is the way we think it works, and then this is the way it actually works, right? You get this plate of spaghetti that is a big mishmash of all these different activities that are occurring. And maybe a lot of those I didn't even know were happening, right? Because that's the idea here, is that we're going to start uncovering outliers and exception paths and different things that maybe we need to correct, or maybe those are the right path, but understanding why it's going down one path versus the other is a key part of this. So just creating the process, that's one piece, right? We now have the process. We can see that it's heat mapped based on frequency. So the more frequent that activity is occurring, the darker the blue. I can change the heat map. I can look at it by rework cycles. How many times does this step repeat? I can look at it by duration. How long does this step take on average? We can look at it by cost. That's another factor that I can put in. So if I can tie a cost with either the resource or the role, then I can calculate how much that activity is actually costing me as a business. So there's a lot of different ways that we can look at this information, but let's go ahead and dig into this step, for example. So in this case, I'm going to look at this through a couple of different lenses. We can look at this through maybe the state that it happened in, right? So we can see that California has most of the claims that are occurring, and we can see that on average, they take about the same amount of time, total time. We can look at this by resource. So we can look at this by who worked on the claim. And this one's interesting. For that one step, this one resource is doing 25% of the work. So what's going on there, right? What's actually happening? Why is that taking so long? And so we can look at a number of different factors there. We can look at the claim amount, right? On average, how much was the claim? And so a lot of different ways that we can manipulate the data that way. I can then start to refine the data. So looking at this process, maybe I don't necessarily need to see all the one-off scenarios. I want to refine this down. So let's get closer to the happy path, right? This is now probably closer to what I've documented as my business process. Yes, we have some outliers sometimes, right? When the customer rejects something or someone else, it gets escalated. But most of the time it follows this path, right? What I want to do now is flip this on its side and look at this as a true process diagram in a standardized format. In this case, what we call business process modeling notation, or BPMN. Now we can start to see where the decision points are happening and all the different steps that are occurring in the loopbacks. And from here, I can start digging into the why, right? And really start understanding root cause and dig into why it's going down one path or the other. Why is it getting rejected at the customer step? Or what are some of the patterns where we do see success on going from one step to another? And so just on that simple decision mapping, I can dig into, show me some of the patterns and correlations that are occurring, right? And I can zoom out a bit too. So customer in charge to customer return, that's probably not what we want. We have about 66% of the time, it's when the resource is not one of those 3 people, right? Or when we see in charge to checkout, that's probably what we want, right? Now it's showing that the resource is one of these 3 people. So maybe these are our experts, or maybe these are our super users, or maybe they're just cherry picking and they're getting it right 79% of the time. We don't know, right? So you still need to have stakeholders. You still need to have subject matter experts looking at this and sharing, okay, yeah, that looks right, or wait, that shouldn't be like that. Let's dig into that a bit more. And so to do that, we can start doing things like simulation. We can start looking at what if scenarios to say, if I were to improve the throughput on a certain activity, or if I were to change the probability of going down one path or the other, what kind of impact does that have? Because a lot of times you may have unintended consequences where you improve one step, but that makes the downstream steps even worse, right? Because they're getting flooded with new activities and overloaded, and so it's actually making the process less efficient. And so understanding what kind of impact you can have is a huge piece of this. And then the last piece I'm going to show here is also kind of that analysis piece, which allows us to look at this through different lenses, right? So I have a way to look at all of the different variations that this process can follow and start to see what is actually happening here, and digging into some of the patterns where 13% of the time it's happening like this, which is something I think makes sense, right? That flow is probably what our happy path looks like, but then 12% of the time it looks like this, and then much distant third it looks like this. This is a kind of a really out of whack, right? So we see all these different variations, and I can start to dig into the data and really pivot on some of this information. That is really going to help me understand the why, and then feeding that back into Cognos as a new dashboard or a new set of information allows me to have that round trip and that full cycle of the further analysis.